It's funny. When I think about empathy,
Mm-hmm.
I usually picture, someone who's a good listener, like someone who can really understand
Yeah.
what someone else is going through. But then I came across this research on
Hmm.
mere touch synesthesia, and wow, it really blew my mind.
Yeah.
That's like empathy on steroids, right?
It really is.
Instead of just understanding someone's pain, these people actually feel it themselves.
That's right.
That's
It
wild.
really challenges the traditional view of autism as, a condition marked by
Right.
social deficits.
Yeah, because if you're feeling someone else's pain that intensely,
Hmm.
you're definitely not lacking in the empathy department.
Exactly. And it really highlights the incredible diversity within the autism spectrum.
Okay, so before we go any further, can we just back up for a second? For those who are maybe not familiar with mirror touch synesthesia,
Sure.
can you give us a quick definition?
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
mirror touch synesthesia is a neurological phenomenon where a person experiences the same sensations that they observe in another person.
Whoa. Okay, so
Yeah.
like if they see someone get hugged, they feel the hug on their own body.
Exactly. Or if they see someone get pricked by a needle,
Ouch.
they might feel a similar sensation in the same spot on their own arm.
Oh, wow. I can see how that could be pretty intense,
They can be.
especially if you're like watching a movie with a lot of action or something.
Yeah, or even just everyday interactions.
Right, just Azure.
Seeing someone trip and fall or
Oh, gosh. So
stub their toe.
you'd be feeling that all the time.
And for some people, it's not just physical sensations, it's emotions too.
Whoa. Okay, hold on. So you're saying someone with mirror touch synesthesia could actually feel someone else's emotions as if they were their own.
Precisely. So if they see someone laughing with joy, they might feel a surge of happiness themselves.
Hmm.
Or if they witness someone grieving,
Yeah.
they might experience a wave of sadness.
Okay, so this is way more than just being a good listener. This is like literally feeling what someone else is feeling.
It is. It's like having this deep, visceral connection to the emotional states of others.
That's incredible.
It's really quite fascinating.
Okay, I'm hooked. I need to know more about this.
All right, well, there's a lot to unpack here, so where shall we start?
Well, first of all, I got to know, how is this even possible? Like, what's going on in the brain that causes this kind of cross-wiring of senses?
That's a great question, and scientists are still trying to understand all the complexities, but it's thought to involve certain areas of the brain, like the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex.
Okay, and what do those areas do?
Well, these are regions involved in processing our own sensations, as well as understanding the actions and intentions of others.
Right, so they're like the bridge between our internal world and the external world.
Yeah.
And in people with mirror touch synesthesia, this bridge is somehow more, I don't know, supercharged,
You could say that. It's like there's a heightened connectivity between these regions. Uh-huh.
leading to this blending of self and other.
So they're not just seeing someone else's experience, they're almost experiencing it as their own. That's wild.
It is, and it gets even more interesting when we look at the connection between mirror touch synesthesia and autism.
Oh, right, you mentioned that earlier. So what's the link there?
Well, autistic individuals often show differences in brain connectivity and function, particularly in areas related to sensory processing and social cognition. And some researchers believe that these differences might actually predispose some autistic people to mirror touch synesthesia.
So it's not just a random quirk. It's
Huh.
potentially a reflection of a fundamental difference in how the brain is wired. That's fascinating.
And it challenges the traditional view of autism as a deficit in empathy.
Right. Because if anything, these individuals seem to have an abundance of empathy, even if it manifests in a way that's different from what we're used to.
Exactly, and this leads to the idea of what some researchers call the empathetic advantage.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is the empathetic advantage and how does it play out in real life? Well, that's what we'll delve into next.
Okay, I can't wait. We'll be right back to explore how this amazing ability and impacts social connections and relationships.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we're back and we're talking about this idea of the empathetic advantage,
Mm-hmm.
which honestly sounds kind of like a superpower to me.
It can be, in a way.
Right, like being able to actually feel what someone else is feeling.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique ability.
So let's dive into that.
Uh-huh.
How does this empathetic advantage play out in real life? I mean, we've talked about how intense it can be
Right.
to feel all those sensations and emotions.
Yeah.
But how does it actually impact people's interactions with others?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, for sure.
Hmm.
On the one hand, it can lead to a profound depth of understanding and connection.
Okay, I can see that.
But on the other hand, it can also be overwhelming, even debilitating at times.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It really depends on the individual and how they learn to manage their experiences.
So let's start with the positives. What are some ways this heightened empathy might actually make social interactions easier for people with mirror touch synesthesia?
Well, one of the biggest advantages is the ability to pick up on nonverbal cues.
Oh, right, like body language and facial expressions.
Exactly. Most people rely on those cues to some extent, but for someone with mirror touch synesthesia, those cues are amplified.
Okay. So it's not just seeing someone's facial expression, it's actually feeling the emotion behind it.
Exactly. They might not even consciously register the facial expression itself,
Oh, wow.
but they'll feel a wave of sadness or anger or joy.
That's incredible. I mean, talk about reading the room.
Yeah, it's like having an emotional sixth sense.
So they're not just understanding what someone is saying, they're feeling it on a deeper level.
Exactly. And that can lead to a much more nuanced and empathetic understanding of other people.
Okay. I could see that could be a real advantage, especially in situations where people aren't being direct about their feelings.
Mm.
Like maybe they're saying they're fine, but their body language is screaming otherwise.
Right. Someone with mirror touch synesthesia might pick up on that discrepancy right away.
That's fascinating. But I imagine it could also be pretty confusing, right? Like if you're constantly bombarded with other people's emotions, how do you even know which emotions are yours and which belong to someone else?
That's a great point, and it's definitely one of the challenges that people with mirror touch synesthesia have to learn to navigate.
So it's not all sunshine and roses then.
Not always. It can be a real struggle to differentiate between your own emotional state and the emotional states of those around you.
Right, because if you're feeling someone else's anxiety, you might start to feel anxious yourself.
Exactly. And that can lead to a kind of emotional contagion
Mm.
where you're constantly absorbing the emotions of others, even if you don't want to.
Oh, wow. That sounds pretty intense.
It can be. And it's one of the reasons why self-care and emotional regulation are so important for people with mirror touch synesthesia.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What are some strategies that people can use to manage the intensity of these experiences?
Well, one of the most important things is to develop a strong sense of self-awareness,
Hmm.
understanding your own emotional patterns, recognizing your triggers, and learning to distinguish between your own feelings and the feelings you're mirroring from others.
So it's like having this emotional radar, but you need to learn how to use it effectively.
Exactly, and that takes practice.
Right. Are there any specific techniques that people find helpful?
Yeah, there are a lot of different approaches.
Okay.
Some people find mindfulness practices helpful,
Hmm.
like meditation or deep breathing exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Others benefit from journaling or talking to a therapist.
Yeah, it makes sense that having a safe space to process those experiences would be really important.
It is, and it's also important to remember that everyone is different.
Okay.
What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about finding what works for you and creating a personalized toolkit for managing your experiences.
Exactly, and it's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious, though, beyond those individual strategies, is there anything that society as a whole can do to create a more supportive environment for
Yeah.
people with mirror touch synesthesia? I mean, we've been talking about how challenging it can be to navigate a world that's not really designed for this kind of sensory experience.
You're absolutely right, and that's a really important question.
Right, because if we're talking about creating a more inclusive world,
Mm-hmm.
that includes people with all sorts of different neurotypes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
All right, so we're back, and I'm ready to tackle this question of creating a more inclusive world for people with mirror touch synesthesia.
Okay.
I mean, we talk about how challenging it can be to navigate a world that's not really designed for this kind of
Right.
sensory experience, right? So where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with education. The more we understand about neurodiversity,
Okay.
the better equipped we'll be to create environments that are truly inclusive.
So like educating ourselves about mirror touch synesthesia specifically?
Yes, but also about neurodiversity in general.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Understanding that there are many different ways of experiencing the world.
Right, like what might feel normal to one person
Exactly.
could be totally overwhelming to someone else.
Exactly. And that includes things like sensory processing, communication styles, social interaction patterns, all of that.
Okay, so it's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to, well, pretty much anything.
Right.
But how do we actually put that into practice? I mean, it's one thing to say we need to be more understanding,
Mm-hmm.
but how do we actually translate that into tangible changes?
Well, I think it starts with small steps.
Okay.
Like in schools, for example,
Uh-huh.
we could provide quiet spaces for students who need a break from sensory overload.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like,
Those-
I'm thinking about those kids who just can't handle the noise and chaos of the cafeteria at lunchtime.
Exactly. Or we could offer flexible seating arrangements. Oh, right, to accommodate different sensory needs.
Yeah, like some kids might need to move around more,
Hmm.
while others might need to be in a more confined space to feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that what might seem like a small accommodation to one person
Right.
could be a game changer for someone else.
Absolutely. And it's not just about schools, of course.
Right. What about workplaces?
In workplaces, we could think about things like flexible work schedules, providing noise-canceling headphones,
Oh, yeah, those are a lifesaver for me, even without mirror touch synesthesia.
or even just being mindful of lighting and scents in the office environment.
Yeah, because those fluorescent lights can be brutal.
They can.
And strong perfumes or air fresheners can be really overwhelming for some people.
Exactly. It's about creating a sensory environment that's as inclusive as possible.
Okay, and what about families? I mean, those are the people we're closest to, so how can we be more supportive within our own homes?
I think communication is key.
Creating a space where everyone feels comfortable expressing their needs and preferences, and where those needs are respected.
So it's about understanding that what works for one family member might not work for another,
Right.
and that's okay.
Exactly. It's about flexibility and compromise.
And a lot of empathy, it seems like.
Definitely. And that's what's so fascinating about mirror touch synesthesia.
Yeah.
It really highlights the power of empathy and the importance of understanding different perspectives.
It's like those with mirror touch synesthesia are showing us what true empathy can look like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's making me think about how we view neurodiversity in general.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about how it can be challenging for people with mirror touch synesthesia to navigate a world that's not really designed for them.
Right.
But what if we flip the script?
What do you mean?
What if instead of seeing neurodiversity as something to be fixed or overcome,
Mm-hmm.
we started to see it as a source of strength and innovation?
I think that's a beautiful idea.
Right, because if we can learn to appreciate the unique perspectives and abilities that come with neurodiversity,
Yeah.
we can create a world that's richer and more vibrant for everyone.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
about embracing the full spectrum of human experience.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights with me today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has challenged your assumptions, opened your mind to new possibilities, and inspired you to think differently about neurodiversity and the power of empathy.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep diving deep.